Hello and thanks for checking out ChartGuys.com. We're proud to be one of the most successful technical analysis communities online, teaching you the skills to become a more confident, effective, and informed trader. Join our community of hundreds of analysts worldwide working together to learn the charts, generate profit, and achieve financial independence. For access to daily live chart analysis and market coverage, a thriving chat community, along with dozens of hours of exclusive educational materials. We look forward to seeing you. Let's check out some charts. Hey everyone, checking in on the USMJ sector. So this past week, the big news was Curaleaf buying out the largest private MJ company, becoming a behemoth of a company itself. And what we were looking for is this the spark that's going to take us out of the summer lull and start to shift momentum? And the short answer is no. Not seeing any kind of correlation among other names as far as, this isn't a news event that's on par with CGC and Canopy News, or I should say with Constellation News. But when that happened, the entire sector rallied around it. So a much different reaction. Saw a little bit of green the day that happened, aside from the big green on Curaleaf. But overall, big picture, that's not a spark that is shifting the sentiment in this sector at this point. The S&P 500 at the end of this week started to show the first signs of weakness, indicating potential weekly consolidation is incoming. So over the next week or two, we're going to have to be watching to see what does this sector do when the overall market consolidates. How's it going to respond to that? And are we headed to lower lows, as many individual names have limited support with where we stand? As always, daily trend changes have to change to even hint at a shift in momentum, and most names have been struggling to do that for about 2 months at this point. So GWPH, we had a choppy action that stopped me out when I attempted to enter looking for a weekly higher low, and now we're getting the first little signs of the potential red flags. Short-term action, this is a potential bear flag, a weak bounce attempt with a lack of follow-through, and if we were to drop down on Monday and break 164.07, the low of Friday, the odds of it being a bear flag would increase. We look at the weekly time frame, and it was very healthy consolidation. The bulls set their support. They attempted continuation, and you can see 180 is really giving the bulls a lot of trouble, just that psychological level. We failed to see a move back to the recent highs, and then we broke below the low of that consolidation. So 150-132 remains the most important support level for me, but the failed continuation attempt definitely is a bit concerning for the bulls. IIPR, daily trend change, is close to changing to favor the bears. We have our high, the all-time high, low the pullback in response to dilution news, a lower high at 130.50, and if we drop down and break 122.42, which held Friday as a double bottom, but if that level breaks, that's then our daily lower high and lower low. From there, we have a couple support levels, 119.34, 118.01. The most important short-term support level for me is 115.89, because that's the lowest price that we have seen in the last few weeks, and there is a lack of support immediately below that. So weekly consolidation is underway for IIPR, and there's no red flags on this weekly time frame whatsoever. We could pull back to 100 and still be in a very healthy uptrend. The last little weekly higher low was at 81.23, and from that point we ran 60%. So looking for exponential support to potentially come into play this coming week. That's going to be in the low 1 teens. And if we keep pulling back, the weekly exponential support, the 12 period here, will be our initial target. Curaleaf, so we had the bullish reaction. Again, I am skeptical of all names in the MJ space until they change the daily trend. I pointed out in recent videos how we've seen Cron and CGC and other names with big daily bull moves in the last couple months and no follow through. The bulls must form a daily higher low and then break the high of this reaction of 1103 to show continued buying pressure, continued pressure on shorts, and just continued interest. So we have a daily inside bar. On Monday, if we break $10, we're going to be looking for a daily higher low to form. And if we can hold $10 on Monday, that would tell us the daily consolidation is not underway yet, as every single day the last 5 days has been a little higher low. Once that pattern breaks, daily consolidation is underway, and it'll be up to the bulls to change that daily trend. This one bull move on news is not enough. We need that continuation. I personally have been trading Curaleaf short term. If we do drop down into hourly oversold conditions, which we're not close to, but if we consolidated on the daily and we drop down back to the lower $9 range and that hourly RSI started dropping down, then I would get interested in looking to scale in, looking for a daily higher low to form. But at this point, I'm not interested in Curaleaf. I want to wait for this consolidation to sort itself out a little bit and become a bit more clear. TRUL fading back down. If the bulls want to change this daily trend, we have to hold 1280 and see a bull break of 1462. This bounce was just an oversold bounce on shorter term time frames to give us a lower high. We're right back down to the lows. If we break 1280, zooming out to find the next support level, we're looking down at 1263. And again, no trend change in sight. We knew these bounces. We were just looking for lower highs. And when you see this much consolidation from the lower high, it's a red flag because the odds of continuation and a trend change are much less likely when you give back that much of the move. IAN. So a couple patterns I want to point out, and T-God was one of them on the Canadian sector video, but it's this falling wedge on Curaleaf. And obviously the falling wedge broke bullish on the news, and that's a nice and easy way to break resistance. But I want to point out these patterns because what they indicate is they're bullish reversal patterns, and generally they pretty much just tell us the bears are getting exhausted, where we see lower lows with a lack of follow through, and then we see a momentum shift. And that's what we're looking for, that momentum shift. So there are a handful of names that are in this falling wedge pattern that you could draw it. Like I said, T-God is one you could draw it on. You could draw it on MedMen, or I should say IAN, not MedMen. But the main point of this pattern is it's not enough for me to be making an entry. You know, I'm not looking at this pattern and saying, oh, that's a falling wedge, I'm going to make an entry because this pattern is forming. It's a pattern that tells me pay attention. And we can see a shift in momentum in the short term resulting from this pattern, but it's generally not enough for me to make an entry in itself. So here on IAN, if we were going to draw a falling wedge, again, lower highs, lower lows, not a ton of follow through, and potentially rejecting from resistance. If we drop down below 352, there's a lack of support, but if we don't get a lot of follow through, we will stay in this falling wedge pattern. So again, I'm keeping an eye on it, and we'll see if anything develops from there. The bulls have to hold 352 and break the high of 395 if we are going to see a daily trend change. So we're heading back down, a little daily inside bar, no volume whatsoever. There's been insider buying on IAN, and honestly, I'm going to remain a little skeptical. Yes, it's a great sign that management is buying, especially when it's not a ton of companies that are doing that in this sector right now, and there's other companies that are selling shares. So again, we're being picky if we're being critical that the shares amounts are small. I've never seen insider buys this small, just to tell it like it is. In my opinion, it's a bit of a press move. It's a bit of a move saying, you know, we want to get a little bit of attention and say, hey, look at us, we're buying some shares. And to me, it's not enough. It's nice, and we can't, you know, knock the company for doing it, but we can be skeptical. It's our money, and if I want management to really show some proof and buy some significant amount of money, and if they don't, then I'm skeptical. That's our right as shareholders. We can do whatever we want with our money. So again, you're going to get both sides of the argument. People are pumped that they're buying because nobody else is, and that's the case. They're absolutely right. And there's other people saying these are tiny amounts and they're just doing it, you know, for optics. And that's right as well, in my opinion. So there's no real right or wrong answer as to whether it's good or not. But if people are holding out and that's not enough for them to be believers and buying down here, that's fine too. So I want to see a change in price. I want to see a reflection that the market cares about that. And right now, what the market is telling me is it's not enough to move the needle. The market does not care that the company is buying shares right now. We'll see if that changes, but until the daily trend changes, that's going to remain the case. So we're watching the exponential resistances. We've got 395 as the most important short-term level. If we can break 395, 447 will become the most important support level. And if 352 ends up breaking, we're going to be looking down at 3 psychological, really. Again, so many of these names, there is no support nearby, so we can always see another leg down. We have to constantly remind ourselves that. MedMen, continuing its pullback, red flag on the weekly. Again, we've given back way too much of this move. We saw a very solid bounce from 251 to 362, and now we've given back probably 3/4 of that move. The only support levels nearby, there's 2 levels left. We're looking at 266 and 251. That's it. Anything on the daily under 308 is just a lower high. Bulls gave it a good shot, but it wasn't enough, essentially. I would be surprised if we were to head straight down and break 251 from here to an all-time low. I expect that level to hold. There's a potential bottom fishing play with that support level approaching, and then we would just look for a bounce and look for a lower high and a tightening weekly range. Little bit of uptick in bear volume, certainly have to pay attention to that. If we do see big bear volume this coming week, then it is possible to break 251, but if that bear volume is absent, then I expect it to hold at least the initial test. CWeb, so we lost the daily uptrend. Haven't seen a ton of bear follow through at this point. Again, we have a perfect comparison now. This is what CWeb bulls don't want to see at all. Slight increase of bear volume and giving back the entirety of this move. If CWeb and MedWen were in the same boat, CWeb right now would be trading at about $17 or below. So the bulls still holding on, declining bear volume. That's a good start. And let's see if the bulls can form a healthy day or a healthy weekly higher low compared to 1465, and then try and change the longer term weekly trend. And if the bulls can pull that off, it will be notable. And 1 point in favor, again, we can keep score. Bear points in favor of the Bears, and right now there's a lot of tally marks in that section, and points in favor of the Bulls, and every individual name that makes a big move. You know, if Curaleaf changes its daily trend and gets continuation, put a check mark in the side of the bull category. If CWeb changes its weekly chart, check mark for the bulls. But right now, there are a few check marks for the bulls, and that's what we have to see. We have to see them start piling up in order to see the sentiment shift in the sector as a whole. OH had a nice short-term oversold bounce. The hourly and the 4-hour RSI were crushed. They cooled off, and we faded back down to the lows. So again, no bounce followed through at this point. It's just a short-term bounce. Cool off those RSI levels, and then back to business as usual with the trend. Looking at our recent low, 693 is the only support level nearby. After 693, we're going to be looking down at 618. And now we have a new daily lower high at 783. Bulls have to break 783 for me to even bat an eye to pay attention. CL, same thing. Bears in complete control. 1149 broke, so we're dropping down to lower lows. Weekly bounce, saw no follow through. Next support level after $12, which we've already broken. 11 and then 1072. Again, no support in sight. Daily RSI back to oversold. Only oversold bounces I like in the USMJ space are when the daily, 4-hour, hourly, 15-minute, 5-minute are all oversold. That tells us a short-term bounce is likely coming in the near term. That was the case for CL and OH to start Friday, and we did get that short-term bounce, and there was a decent little opportunity in there. Again, you can't be playing with too significant positions because the liquidity is not great, but it was a 7% bounce. So again, if you're just day trading or short-term trading, there's opportunity in there, even if you're only getting 2 or 3%, just getting the meat of that move. It's playing against the trend, so obviously you want to be experienced with bounce plays to be looking for those kinds of trades, but they're there, and they are worthwhile if that's up your alley as a trader. GTII, bears in full control. Daily RSI oversold. Weekly bear flag confirmed. Only clear support is 1030 and 1008, and we're heading down to a must-hold support level. If GTII breaks this support level, looking at the monthly time frame, it's going to be a very notable shift. We will then be in a monthly downtrend with a lower high and lower low. So 1008 is a must-hold level. It's still about 18% away from where we stand, and that is the level that we're watching here for the rest of the summer. On the daily time frame, if the bulls cannot break 1263, I don't care what they're doing. And that's really, you can keep a list next to your computer and write down these levels and say, you know, if this level doesn't break, bulls are not proving anything on the daily time frame. And that keeps us in the right mindset. So, you know, if we see a spike in bull volume and a quick 5% move on the hourly, we can look at that and say, yeah, that's a nice little move on the hourly, but bigger picture, it hasn't broken my level and the bulls are not proving anything to me. And that ensures that we stay skeptical of bulls until they take that burden of proof off their shoulders and actually prove something to us. Harv, key resistance, 789, anything under it, don't care about. And looking at the weekly time frame support, it's 685 and then down to 657. We're heading down towards the all-time low in Harv, and it's a significant pullback. The monthly time frame could still, I mean, the fact that we broke 778 was definitely a little bit of a red flag on the monthly, but I would expect the all-time low to hold, but I would expect a lower high to form when we bounce as well. KSHB, so fading a little bit more after its earnings came out and the market digested it a bit. The bulls have to hold weekly support of 420 and see a break of 541 in order to continue this little higher low, higher high pattern on the weekly time frame. Looking at it on the daily chart, any daily bounce with a lower high compared to 519 will keep the bears in control. So bulls have to shift this daily momentum back in their favor to keep the weekly higher lows intact. But if we look at it on the monthly chart, that's a monthly bear flag. And we have to remain skeptical because we had a tightening monthly pattern that attempted a bull break and failed and then broke some supports. And if we confirm this bear flag and drop down and break 404 and 376, it will be notably bearish longer term. That's the last thing the bulls want to see. So holding these weekly higher lows is really important. CVSI, tightening little daily range, high of 435, low of consolidation down at 401, lower high at 425. So pretty much 401 to 425 is the most important range for me. And if we drop down and break 4, that's going to be a daily lower high and lower low. Bulls have to hold that level. If that were to take place and we lose $4, the weekly chart is a potential bear flag, a weak bounce. It's not a picture perfect bear flag, but the bottom line is it's a weak bounce with no follow through at this point, and we could drop to lower lows just like everybody else. NBEV, weak bounce attempt, short-term resistance is 413, daily exponential resistance has been keeping the price contained for 2 months, and as far as support goes, we're looking down at 390 and 379. And if 379 were to break, we zoom out. The next support level after 379, 303 is the monthly must-hold level here, because if 303 breaks, we're in a monthly downtrend with lower highs and lower lows. So there is a potential play off of 303 support. We're still way above it. If we were to drop down closer and the weekly RSI were to get close to oversold, I might be interested in a play off that major support, but not where we stand right now. And on the daily chart, have to get over daily exponential resistances. PYX is a nice tightening range. This is one to watch into the end of July for a break of this tightening range. Just your standard old equilibrium after a ton of volatility. So high, low, lower high, and we're scouting a higher low compared to 1406. There's a potential play off of 1406 support as we approach it. And I would expect if 1406 holds this coming week, we will look for a break the last week in July or the first week in August. So patiently watching, and if we break bearish, it's back to the weekly time frame being in full control of these bears with lower high and lower low. If we break that pattern bullish, then we're going to be watching the weekly exponential resistance, which has rejected many candles in the last few months. So that's one to write down. Tightening range on PYX, worth watching over the next couple of weeks. ZYNE is on a top watch for Monday. So definitely want to be aware of what's going on with CNE or ZYNE. I think they are looking for, again, I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't put in the research for it. I'm only looking to day trade it if I do trade it. But I believe they're waiting for some results, and there might be some negative assumptions that the longer it takes results, the weaker, or I should say the more likely it's bad news. But bottom line is it's the weekly equilibrium, and there's a playoff support approaching. So the high, low of the pullback, lower high, and 1038, or actually I say 1038 is the must-hold support level. So the daily RSI is close to oversold. I'd be more comfortable if it was oversold. The 4-hour RSI cooled off a little bit the last couple days, but it did see another leg down. It's down in the low 20s. Hourly RSI down in the mid 20s. So if we drop down first thing Monday and head towards that support level, we will be oversold on a lot of time frames as we test a key support. If that breaks, we lose the weekly uptrend and it's a lower high and lower low. If that level holds, we're going to look to remain in a tightening weekly range at least a bit longer. If that level breaks, monthly time frame is then under consolidation mode. Lose the weekly uptrend, you zoom out to the monthly. We've had a monthly bounce underway for the last 3-4 months, and this would indicate a monthly higher low would have to form. CXXI, still not doing much for the bulls. This is another chart where you could potentially draw a falling wedge pattern. And again, I'm doing it on the fly here, and it's not going to be pretty, but you'll get the general idea. Just a tightening range to be watching and looking for a break sometime this coming week. Bulls, if we don't break 86 cents, I don't care what the bulls are doing. That's just step number one to try and pay attention. 72 is key support, and looking at it on the weekly time frame, we can see how important 106 resistance is on the weekly chart. 62 is the must-hold level. Last thing you ever want to see in a penny stock is a black dirt breakdown, because it can get worse, and then we have to see the company do reverse splits and just bad news all around if that level were to break. And last, we'll wrap it up with Tilt. Tilt, same thing, just a clear downtrend of lower highs every single bounce. Anything under 130 was a lower high. We topped out at 112. Now the bulls must hold 73 cents and break 112 to change the daily trend. And we closed at the low of the day on Friday and just absolutely no volume. So, when you're seeing $200,000 of total volume, that's personally something that I have no interest in trading because it's very illiquid. And when you're in a long downtrend and you're a penny stock and you're illiquid, it's the last place I want to be. I played that game 8 years ago when I started stocks, and I had these names that I held on to, and I actually last year just cashed in those tax credits in the sense of penny stocks that go to zero and just don't do anything. Not saying Tilt's going to zero. I'm saying that I've played this game before with marijuana penny stocks, and a lot of them are going to fade and be unable to keep up and have to do reverse splits and dilution. And just like that, you look back on a chart from 3 years prior and the stock's down 95% from 3 years prior. So again, I am not speaking specifically on Tilt. I'm speaking of a group of penny stocks in the marijuana sector in danger zone. That's that. So that's all I got to say. Again, I'm still very skeptical of this space, and my tone has certainly changed. My tone a month ago was looking for, hey, let's keep an eye out if maybe the market priced in the summer lulls too early. Some names that was the case for. TLRY, the initial bounce on MedMen, CWeb, but certainly not the sector as a whole. We did not see the sector shift momentum. We had criteria. We need daily trend changes. We never got daily trend changes. So at this point, now that we're saying, okay, the daily trends are not changing, we must remain very skeptical until that takes place. And once those daily trends change, that will be the first start of the shift in momentum. And then we can start to look at the potential of the summer lull being over. But until we change those daily trends, that is not the case. So we'll continue checking in as always. Again, there will be great opportunity in this sector. It's just a matter of time as always. So no video to wrap it up today. So I'll tell a couple stories from just observations around the pond. The first is involving the frogs. So the frogs that you've heard at the end of these videos are all the little ones, the little peepers. And the ones out back in the pond, or out front in the pond, are much different sounding. And rather than being the high chirp, it's more of a and so I haven't been able to observe them because anytime you get close, they just jump into the water or they're easily disrupted. So I sat back about 50, 100 feet and was just hanging out in the grass and watched these two frogs where it was the middle of the daytime, but one of them was sitting on his lily pad, a smaller guy, and a big guy came up out of the water and they started yelling at each other with their big throats going at it. And the big one just would slowly approach the little one that was sitting on the lily pads. And then they got to a point and they went up like that and met stomach to stomach like two big sumo wrestlers. And they interlocked their arms and did these 3 big barrel rolls splashing all around. Then they disappeared under the water. And then the bigger of the frogs rose up to the top. I assume the other one swam away. And that was now his spot. So after observing, that's what they're yelling about. Now every time I hear them, pretty much all night, they're just establishing their territory and their own little nook of the pond to each other. So I can't stop from hearing now, this is my spot, stay away. And that's now the image I have of the frogs. Another observation about the language of the ducks, I'm starting to learn what their calls mean. After hanging out with the chickens for a long time, you get to know what all their calls mean. And for the ducks, it's the same thing. So now I know food please, where's mom, danger, all these different calls that they make. They have a good morning call as well. I guess that's similar to the where's food call. But mom goes and she'll leave them every now and again and fly away. And there's a bunch of ponds within a 300-yard radius. And so she'll go and check out and scout out the other areas. And they don't always stay in my yard. They go to the pond in a different yard and they'll disappear for a day or two before they come back. And so it's almost, I become a duck babysitter because they'll be out and exposed in the open eating food when mom's not around. And normally mom is, when they're eating, she lets them get all the food and she's just watching. And you can see her tilt her head up whenever there's a shadow or something that flies, she's looking up for the hawk. And so when they don't have that protection, they don't know it. They're still obliviously just wandering around. So mom will leave and I'll hang out with them when they're up in the open. And this morning when I open the door, I usually open the door in the morning and yell something out to the ducks, and they come running up the lawn and I give them some food. But this morning they didn't do that, and as soon as I opened the door, they gave the danger call, and so I knew something was up. I didn't know what it was, but as I started to walk towards the pond, the hawk was perched right in the tree above them as they were in the water, and they were almost being, held captive in the water because they couldn't go anywhere, or the hawk would come after them. So chased the hawk off, he flew away, and then what the mom does is when she comes back, she can't really fly in at an angle and skim on the pond because it's surrounded by trees. So she literally just dive bombs, and she'll yell really loud. She'll honk that she's coming in, and then watching the babies and the mom reunite every time, and all their happy chirping is a very fun thing. So those are observations in the world of nature. And we'll do a bed update. Hopefully next time we update the beds on Monday, they'll be a lot further along. Gonna go move some manure. See y'all next time.